NFC West Preview time on the Old Souls Football Podcast. I'm your host, Steven. We got Neil here.
Hello.
We're almost through. Or what do we, I guess we're three
This
quarters.
will be 5 of 8.
Yeah,
right?
5 of 8. So we're halfway through now.
Yeah, or this will be, we're 5 of 8, and then this will be 6 of 8. So we'll be quarters of the way.
Yeah, we'll be 3/4 of the way through our team preview series. So I think tonight we're going to be talking about one of the more interesting. We talked a little bit on the phone before this. I think one of the more interesting divisions in the NFL going into 2024. And one of the main features of this division are the NFC champions of last year, the San Francisco 49ers. They are, they were probably, I would say, arguably the best team in the NFL last year.
Probably the last 2 years, I'd say.
Yeah, and roster-wise, I would say the most talented. If you look all over their roster, they're just a solid all-around team. They did go 12-5, but I look at them more as a 13-win team because they lost a meaningless game against the Rams to end the season last year. The main question about the 49ers is, I think you put it in a great way. Is the clock ticking, or has it already expired on their window?
So the bill is coming due now for the 49ers. Unfortunately, in the salary cap era, and not unfortunately, fortunately, I guess we would probably say, because this takes away from teams trying to create super teams. The salary cap does hold you back from and keeps teams honest every few years. And right now, you can only really build. Every team has a window, unless you have Pat Mahomes, you have Josh Allen. I guess you could say Joe Burrow. Jordan Love. No, joking. Well, maybe, yeah. But your windows only last so long. And now Brock Purdy's a fine quarterback, a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
I think he is a game manager, but I don't think it's a bad. And I'm not saying it as a negative. I think he runs that offense better than anybody has. As good as Matt Ryan did, or even better than Matt Ryan did. But they were paying he was Mr. Irrelevant, wasn't he?
Yeah, Matt Ryan, Brock Purdy was. Yes.
Purdy, yeah.
Yes, he was the last pick of the 2022 draft, and arguably probably the only good quarterback to come from that draft.
Yeah, for sure. So he was getting the smallest contract. Now, obviously, he would have gotten bonuses and that sort of thing, but he was getting the smallest contract of anybody drafted that year. Now he's going to get a massive contract very soon.
Yeah, at the end of this year, most likely.
At the end of this year.
Yeah,
he'll be Williams is well, obviously we talked about Brandon Ayuk the other day, didn't we, or 2 weeks ago?
A little bit, because we talked about the teams, like what the Raiders could maybe do to get rid of Devontae Adams, because he's not very happy, we think, and maybe they would just do a straight up trade for Ayuk. We discussed that possibility.
Yeah,
but to be more specific on the Ayuk deal is, I think that a lot of people would think this is a hot take, but I don't think. I think he's their best receiver of all of their weapons.
Yes.
He's their best offensive player, not named McCaffrey. Now, I will say McCaffrey is their best offensive player.
Yeah.
But Ayuk, like you mentioned, so Kittle, Deebo Samuel, good chance Ricky Pearsall is going to be like this too. They're going to be like low ADOT kind of players, less than 10 yards down the field. Those guys can't really create big plays without somebody getting vertical.
Yeah, taking the top off the defense.
Brandon Ayuk was a 13 ADOT, which is really high. You don't see a lot of NFL receivers approach 15, and anybody beyond 15 is considered basically a vertical player only.
Yeah.
Like Marquez Valdez-Scantling type players. Those are really big ADOT players, but that's all they do are basically run go routes and posts.
Yeah.
if they trade Ayuk, they don't have a guaranteed guy that can just come in and play like that X receiver that can line up against the best corner on the other team and get downfield and kind of spread the offense out. Because football, like basketball and soccer, like every other sport, it's a game of spacing.
Mm-hmm.
And like Debo and Kittle, like they're very good at very similar things in terms of creating big plays.
Yeah.
Very good run after the catch players. I don't know if they are as effective, and same goes for Christian McCaffrey when they don't have Ayuk on the field. I think Ayuk is a priority for them, and I'm of the hot. I almost think this is a hot take now. I think he's going to stay with San Francisco. I think they're going to figure out a way to pay him.
Yes, they will. Because it makes more sense than if you're keeping. Obviously, if you're going to pay Purdy, and if you want him to have. You can't expect him to replicate that success forever once he gets paid. But this is maybe the biggest reason why not the biggest reason because he has McCaffrey. But as we said, for that offense to work, you need that vertical threat. And if it's not there, and then you pay Brock Purdy $55 million a year, oof.
Yeah. I like Pearsall a lot, but I think the problem there is like I just think he's not. I think he's more of a intermediate kind of player. I don't see him doing the same thing Ayuk
Looking
does.
at their depth chart, they did draft Ronnie Bell last year from Michigan. Not this past year, the year before. Ronnie Bell was Michigan's vertical threat prior to, really last year they didn't have a vertical threat.
But there's a clear fall off in talent.
A massive fall off.
Yeah. Brandon Ayuk is arguably one of the best X receivers in football.
Oh, yes.
I don't think a lot of people agree because he doesn't have like the volume stats of, some other players, right? He's not up there in productivity with, Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill's not really like the same kind of player like as Ayuk is in terms of like size, but like in terms of productivity and being like a team's number one, like people don't think of Ayuk.
Yeah, because there's so many guys to spread the ball around there.
And he's a really good run blocker, which is something in a Shanahan scheme is like actually really valuable. I'm still thinking they get it done, but I think the overall theme, if we want to just keep it as a broader theme of this team, I agree with you that like the bill was good. I guess the bill's coming due.
Yeah.
Right. For this team, because they do not have the luxury after this year of being able to say, hey, we got a quarterback on basically the cheapest deal you could possibly have, which was the last pick of the 7th round. Brock Purdy is going to become I think it's a fair expectation. Like he should, if he has another big year this year, he should be asking for what Jordan Love is going to make in the next few weeks. Tua, like the Dak Prescott's, like those guys that are about to get extensions, like he's going to be right up there in terms of top paid. And then of course, like the guys like Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow will come back and get paid again. And then the Chiefs, meanwhile, will just keep Patrick Mahomes like the 16th highest paid quarterback in the winners.
Right now, the 49ers next year, their effective cap space is $38 million in the red.
Yeah, that's not but you don't know because every year I feel like the other thing about the salary cap is it's almost like conservative with the estimates. Like this year, the cap is way higher than they expected. The one thing that people kind of overstate about when the cap goes way up beyond expectations is they think, oh, we can go shopping for free agents. No, free agents just know that they can charge more.
Exactly.
That's all that happens there. But it does help a team. Like if they want to get an extension done with Ayuk, like if they want to risk, like, hey, we're going to take a gamble and project that the salary cap's actually going to be here next year. There are ways to pay Ayuk. There are ways to pay Trent Williams. And I think they're going to do it simply because this is the window. Like you do this to try and win a Super Bowl. You really effectively with this team have had, this is a 3-year window from 2022 last year and probably this year. You got to the big game last year. You got to the NFC title game this year. If this team is put together and constructed fully, they should be back in the big game. I think they should be the favorites in the NFC once again.
Mm-hmm.
The question, like you said, is age, injury, and contracts. And if some of those things break down, like let's say Trent Williams holds out and is not the same player, which is totally possible at his age. You have players like Fred Warner that have been all world level players for their entire career, but they're hitting that magic 30 number. Are they going to be the same? Can Debo stay healthy the entire year? Can Christian McCaffrey stay healthy? Like he did stay healthy the last 2 years that they made these runs. McCaffrey before that was an injury prone player. So can he keep, and like he's the key to their offense. There are so many question marks with this team. All in all, though, if you look from like a roster standpoint, like I have a hard time finding a roster in the NFL that's better than this.
Yeah.
Like they are stacked and loaded with players. Like it's amazing to me, like a player like Hufanga, the safety, is like the 4th, 5th best player on the defense.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot. Like if everybody stays healthy, this team is awesome. The question I have is, and this is all like kind of going back to like 49ers teams of the past, like the 2020 team, is if injuries don't break their way and they lose guys early in the season, I feel like they just fall apart. And that's like a Kyle Shanahan like theme. They need things to really go well for them and kind of break their way, and they have. Like, and it's kind of funny, like it broke, like their quarterbacks getting hurt 2 years ago actually broke right for them because like it turned out that the best quarterback on their team was their 3rd quarterback. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case if that were to happen again. But overall, like I don't think it's a hot take to say this team's the best team in the NFC.
Yes.
So all in all, where do you think? I guess we'll do win totals at the end.
Yeah, we'll go over that at the end.
I think the team that challenges them though are the LA Rams. I think the Rams are the team. Let's say if San Francisco doesn't have those breaks that we talked about. Let's say Ayuk gets traded, McCaffrey pulls a hamstring in week 3 like he's done before. Things don't break right for them. The team that sneaks in and takes the NFC West, I think it's this team. But I think the same logic applies. With the Rams, I think everything is contingent on the health of Matthew Stafford. I think it's that simple. When Matthew Stafford was healthy and playing well, they won the Super Bowl in 2021. They weren't really that great, but like they made the playoffs. They won their division. They were a good team. 2022, not healthy. He had that elbow problem like all off season, and he didn't even finish the season. So, and I think they won like maybe 4 or 5 games. So last year things got reversed and like they were pretty good again. And they had like some breakout players with Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. Like they kind of came out of nowhere. They hit on some late draft picks. It looks like they've landed a few big players. I think all in all, I think, like I said, it's contingent on Stafford staying healthy. And the other question, I think, defensively is what happens with Aaron Donald. Not what happens with Aaron Donald, but like, how do you replace that level of player? Because he's arguably the best defensive lineman to ever play the position.
Ever play the game, yeah.
So, I mean, I know you love the kid from Florida. I know everybody loves the kid from Florida State. They got Jared Verse and
they got his teammate.
Who's the kid? The stocky kid. I'm blanking, but
here I'm pulling up the depth chart right now.
Yeah,
Braden Fisk.
Braden Fisk, and I really liked him too.
Yeah,
coming out of Florida State, like I love those picks, but like it's a lot to ask. Like, I don't think Braden Fisk is Aaron Donald. Like, I'll just say that right now. I don't think that's a hot take for anybody. But this team, like, I think it's one of it's like I really don't think this is kind of bad radio because it's not hot takey, but things break right. Like I think this team can kind of steam up past the 49ers in some scenarios.
Yeah.
I think, and this team is like sneaky good. If there's like a team that could be a wild card that like made a fluke Super Bowl run, it's in the entire NFL. I feel like it's this team specifically
Well,
because
they've
like
done it before.
yeah,
I mean, I know not the same constructed
yeah,
team, but the same quarterback and head coach.
yeah. It's just health. Like, can this team stay healthy? That's the, they've never been a super deep team, but the credit I'll give to the Rams is I hated their process of how they built their team. Like, they really relied on trading all their draft picks for star players, and that worked. They won a Super Bowl, like, so you got to give them credit for it. And I still hated the process, but where I'm really, really impressed with Les Snead is how well he's drafted on day 3 of the overall, the team that has drafted the best of any team on the 3rd day of the draft with like the later round picks, it's this team. Like half their team are like late round picks.
Yeah.
And they produce. And I have to give them credit. Like, even though I hate the process, I got to respect the results. Like,
yeah. It's worked somehow.
What are your thoughts on this team? Like, do you have any specific things to?
No, I'm really interested, similar to yourself, to see how the defense works their way around not having the greatest defensive player of all time, as you said. But I think the offense is going to be all right. They got stronger as the year went on last year.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, they didn't start off well. They were 3-6. They were 3-6. That's right. And they won 7 of their last 8 games.
Yeah, and they should have won that playoff game against Detroit. They really should have.
And they should have, yes. And actually, the only game they lost was the Ravens game on that punt return touchdown in overtime, which there should have been a block in the back call, if you remember.
Yeah, I think if Kyron Williams stayed healthy in that game to finish, because I want to say their drive like fell short because they couldn't convert on 3rd down. And I think it's because he broke down towards the end of the game because he's so small. Like, Kyron Williams is a really good running back. Like, don't let anybody tell you otherwise just because he's slow on the NFL. Like, he is one of the most fun players to watch. And like, he just has a nose for the end zone, makes all the right cuts. But I think that, like, what I really loved the pick of Blake Corum is they can now give Kyron the ball like a little bit less. He's not going to have to take 25 touches a game, which he shouldn't be doing.
Save him.
Yeah, and like, I love the skill players on this team. Like, I think Kupp is still good, but if Kupp isn't, 100% at one point in the season, you got to target Hogg and Nakua.
Yeah.
I like Higbee. He's coming off an injury. Davis Allen's actually, I think, a really good player out of Clemson. Their offensive line, it's just like, it's also one of those like units that it's just Les Snead finds guys and they just produce. And I think some of that's coaching with McVay and the staff that he puts together. And then we all know Stafford is good when he's on. The question is, what year for Stafford is it? Is it a bad Stafford year or is it a good Stafford year? Because we've seen bad years and they win like 5 games. And the good Stafford years, like they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, or back with the Lions, like it was more like contending just to get to the playoffs or something like that. But still, the range of outcomes is so wide because of Matt Stafford, I think. Like, that's this team, I could see them winning 5 games if everything goes wrong. But I could see them winning the Super Bowl if everything broke their way.
Yeah.
This is the widest range of outcome team.
Do you know who their defensive coordinator is?
Chris Shula.
Yeah.
Because it's on the screen. That's
fun. Oh, yeah. Oh, you have it right there. That's fun. He was born just after. I was going to say I thought he was born just after the Dolphins lost Super Bowl 19, but that was the next year. Yeah. They have a wide range of possibilities. I think one of the things that the Rams may, just going through my game by game picks, I'm not going to give away what I'm having with the Rams, but kind of noticing, even though the NFC is not top heavy, we know that the 49ers probably have do have far and away the best roster in the NFC. I think what the Rams might run into is that even though it's not top heavy, the NFC, that like basically 2 to 8 or 9 seed in the NFC is that's going to be pretty packed. I think, it's not the AFC where you have a lot of seasoned teams. Like the Bengals are probably going to be a wild card team. They were in a Super Bowl a couple years ago. The Jets are the Jets, but they still have Rodgers, and all that sort of thing. I think the NFC is that there's going to be a lot of competition for wild card spots. And that's what the Rams, I think, might struggle with it if they get off to a rough start early in the season again. Because like they play 5 NFC teams early on, that could be all of them legitimately. Some of them are going to be division winners, but some of them could be competing for wild card spots, like the Cardinals. We'll talk about them in a second. You never know what they could do. They play the Bears in Chicago. That's going to be a big game, I think, for head-to-head purposes later in the year. They play Green Bay. They play Detroit week 1. So those are all like, they have to come away with victories early on in some of those games because they don't want to get to December where there's more AFC team. Well, they play the Jets and the Bills in December, but they don't want to be getting to week 17 and being like, damn, September sucked. Like if only we had beaten Detroit, if only we'd beaten Green Bay or Chicago, and they'll beat some of those teams, certainly. But I don't know if they can do what they did last year, and expect that, because winning 7 of your last 8 in the NFL, there's usually 1 or 2 teams, if that do that. You can't rely on you being the team that does it again.
No, yeah. And I think that, like, my last point on the Rams too, like, just rolling through their defense, and what stands out so much to me is the production that they've gotten. Like I mentioned, from like later picks in the draft. But like, for example, guys that are like 25 years and younger, like Ernest Jones was graded out as the 13th best linebacker in the NFL. Last season, he was drafted in 2021 from South Carolina in the 3rd round. Kobe Turner, the interior defensive line, he was a rookie last year, like 10th best defensive interior rusher by PFF. Bobby Brown, like solid 72 grade. He was a rookie last year, I believe, or a 3rd-year player last year, 4th round pick. But the point is, what I'm making is, like, they're getting solid production where teams aren't getting that from 4th, 5th, 6th round picks. And they're getting like high-end performances. Like, what I'll say is, like, they're taking advantage of the picks that they have. So Les Snead, like, I think, like, has done a really masterful job at putting this team together. So that's just my big takeaway for this Rams team. I think they're a little undervalued by everybody because I like the coach, I like the roster, I like the quarterback as long as he's healthy. Like, that's what everything is contingent on. If Stafford is healthy, this team's going to be really good. And they could even win the NFC West if things break wrong for the 49ers.
Yeah.
So you good on the Rams?
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. So next we have the Seattle Seahawks. This was a team that, in my opinion, I had no idea how to value this team. I just think there are so many possibilities. Starting with Mike McDonald, new head coach. I like him. I think that was a good hire. I think he's going to bring a lot of what Pete Carroll brought on the defensive side of the ball in terms of like attitude, like identity, which when we think of the Seahawks, we always think defense, right? We think of really like size, speed players. I think the same thing is going to apply with Mike McDaniel. Like he's taking the strengths of Pete Carroll, but he brought in Ryan Grubb. I think that's the story of this offseason because Ryan Grubb was a Kalen DeBoer disciple. And he was at Washington last year. And Washington, I'm talking about not the Commanders, but the Huskies in college football, was arguably one of the best offensive minds in college football last year. And they had a prolific passing game that just threw it all over the yard. This team has a lot of that personnel that you would think that could run that kind of offense with Jackson Smith and Jigba playing the slot. You got DK Metcalf out wide as the X. You got Tyler Lockett.
Tyler Lockett is still there.
Yeah, and he's productive. No one thinks no one drafts him in fantasy, but Tyler Lockett's good. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
Zach Charbonnet has a lot of receiving ability out of the backfield, and Kenneth Walker is a big play waiting to happen in the run game. Basically like the new Nick Chubb, essentially. Yeah. So there's a lot of talent on this team. My main question is can Geno Smith keep outplaying what we think Geno Smith actually is? Geno Smith is like a bottom tier NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
He's like, if there were backup quarterbacks, he would be the best in the league. But it's like, I don't see a ceiling for this team because I just don't see it with Geno Smith. I don't think that this team can go much beyond 9-8. I think like
that would be, that would be like 95th percentile stuff.
Do you remember the Panthers with Jake Delhomme?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it feels like with Geno. Like Jake Delhomme had good seasons and even got to a Super Bowl. Geno hadn't even done that. But like Jake Delhomme had good statistical seasons, but it never felt like, this team is a favorite. Like this team's going all the way because Jake Delhomme's their quarterback. No one ever freaking said that.
Yeah.
And that's my feeling. Like this team, I think this is where if Atlanta hadn't reached on Penix, this is the scenario I wanted for the draft because this would have been perfect. Like I thought Dallas, but in hindsight, I don't think Penix would have fell this far. But it would have been freaking perfect for Penix to land here and let Geno plays this year. He's still with Ryan Grubb, stays in Seattle, and then gets this offense and these receivers. But it's kind of frustrating because I don't hate Geno. It's kind of hard. I can see them making the playoffs. Like they went 9-8 last year. That's not crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't see upside either. I don't love this team. And that's it, just because of the quarterback. I don't love the quarterback enough to really buy in.
Yeah, and beyond that, I think there are two things that come to mind for the Seahawks. How much of Geno's ascension was, and now I know Seahawks fans were excited, or actually every team hates their offensive coordinator. Let's just say that everybody hates their offensive coordinator. Because if you love him, that means he's just going to get a job somewhere else. That's really what the NFL is. So a lot of Seahawks fans were sick of Shane Waldron. But when I did so I read all those complaints and knowing that, a lot of people just don't like who their OC is. But I kind of did some investigating a few months ago after the Bears hired Waldron just to see, why? What's going on? And what I think a lot of Seahawks fans were neglecting, there was more people complaining about that than how terrible their defense was. The offense, the Seahawks were the only offense last year that didn't run 1,000 plays.
Yeah, they were really archaic, and I think that was the approach of Pete Carroll.
Yeah, their defense could not get off the field on third down. Yeah. Now, that's why they hired Mike McDonald. But
I think some of it was their approach too. They didn't play very fast. Like offensively, they were always a team that they're a ground and pound team. This team under Carroll's leadership, when he was still, because when Carroll was the head coach, he still really had control of the team.
Yeah, but this is John Schneider's first year as a GM, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
so, like, but
after
think about
having
it.
the title for years,
But think
he
about it, in
never really
back-to-back
got to pick the team.
yeah, but think about it, in back-to-back years, they used top 60 picks on running back.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way that Pete Carroll has always been, like, we're gonna run the ball. Like, they played slow when they had Russell Wilson, who's arguably a Hall of Fame quarterback,
Yeah.
and that's I mean, their defense, like you mentioned, like, it left some room to be desired. It's probably one of the worst defenses that the Seahawks have fielded under Pete Carroll.
Easily, yeah.
So yeah, that played into it, but I think it was just the philosophy. Like, they didn't run a lot of plays because they didn't want to. I think, like, their whole thing is that, like, they ran the play clock down to
Yeah. Also,
3
keep the
seconds.
defense off the field.
Yeah, they kept the defense off the field. But, like, if you talk to any analytics person, we had Aaron Schatz on, like,
Yeah.
that's not usually a good philosophy to have, like, in
No.
terms of you wanna run a lot of plays because it gives you more chance to score points, like,
Yes.
and typically you have a better chance to win if you're running more plays. There's a lot of correlation there, but it never made any sense either because, like, with their philosophy, because you're this, I mean, the best part of your team are the weapons you have offensively. You spent a first round pick on Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf. We've seen glimpses of him just breaking games.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Lockett, same thing. We've seen glimpses of him just like 160, 170-yard games.
Yeah.
But
or scoring a 70-yard touchdown when they need it most.
Yeah, but and like with Russ, that was like a little because like Russ would just like pull it out of his ass a lot of the times. Like in the fourth quarter, they'd be up, they'd be down like 16-13. And then that's when DK Metcalf scores a 70-yard touchdown and the Seahawks win by 3. Like that's how it always worked under Russ. Like they had so many fourth quarter comebacks. And Geno has done that to kind of a lesser extent because as much as people want to bag on Russ, like Russ in his prime was better than Geno is right now.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see, like, I love the Ryan Grubb hire. I think Mike McDonald will help get the defense back in the direction they needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see a lot of progress offensively in how they run things, and I think that's going to happen with Grubb. But my main question is, like, how high can Geno Smith actually take you?
Yeah.
Like, can this be a top 5 offense in the league? I think, like, from a like receiver standpoint and like running game standpoint, absolutely. They have all the talent that you would need.
Yeah.
But can Geno be the guy that delivers that? I think Geno is capable, but that's a question, and I'm starting to think this Seahawks team, like the way I peg them, they're going to be a 7-10 win team, and I think they're kind of right where they were last year because I think they're going to take a step up on defense, but I think they're going to kind of stay flat on offense because Geno is kind of we know what he is. Like he's not going to improve off of what he's been.
And I kind of have them going backwards.
Yeah. So you have them closer to 7 wins.
I have them a little lower than 7 wins.
7. Wow. So I'm once again more optimistic than you are on it.
Yes. I don't. I think last year was another year where similar to who was it we were talking about? The Broncos last week. The 9 wins, or what was it? Were the Broncos 9-8 too?
No, I think they were 8-9.
8-9. So the 8-9, that I think it kind of flattered them a little bit more than they were.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're due a bit of a regression. And especially with the first year head coach, a defensive head coach, I think that this is going to be a year they might pick it up again in a year. I think Mike McDonald could be a very successful head coach.
Yeah, and I said 10 wins is like a very optimistic.
Yes, yeah.
That's basically like you would need really injuries from the 49ers and Rams to probably get that done.
I just see of the 4 teams that are in that division, I think they're clearly the worst.
Yeah, I just don't know, like, because I still like a lot of their players. And I don't think Geno is bad. Like, that's the thing, is I don't know if he's actually like, it's Jake Delhomme. Like, it's just like the Panthers teams were never bad. They just weren't like, there's so many of those teams won like 7, 8 games.
Yeah.
And like occasionally John Fox and Jake Delhomme had really great years and they won 11.
But even with like the Jake Delhomme thing, like Jake Delhomme in this day and age, like that type of production wouldn't net you, 9 wins again.
You would need luck on your side,
You would need
which is what I'm saying. Like, if
they
get
won
lucky,
quite a few close games last year too.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, I talk in range of outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So I should maybe say the range is probably closer to 6. Because I don't think they're worse than 6. I think they still have enough talent to get the 6 as a low end, and I think their high end's 10. So like, if everything breaks right, they're 10. I think, to me, they feel like a 7-8 win team though.
They do have a tough schedule though, looking at this.
And to your point, I think one of the things you could also argue against them is last year you could pencil in 2 easy wins against Arizona. Yeah. And that's not going to happen. And we'll transition very nicely to the Arizona Cardinals as our last team here. Arizona, nowhere to go but up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am, once again, I feel like this is a theme of the series. I'm higher on a lot of teams. Like, I'm higher on bad teams. I think, like, from when they're coming off a bad season.
You buy the dip.
I buy the dip. I can't help it. Even if it's a falling knife, I'm gonna buy it. So this Arizona team, they were really hard to watch last year. They were so, they had no talent. Like, you could just see it. Like, they just didn't have anything. Even when Kyler came back, like, he played pretty well. Like, they had a big win against the Steelers, but overall, like, they were just depleted. They had a big draft though, and they added a lot of talent. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the, like, he'll be like the big profile name. But this roster has seen an overhaul, and I think one of the biggest overhauls that no one's talking about is Kyler's going to be like a full off-season version. He's not coming off the ACL. The thing now though is, like, is Arizona going to win the division? I give it like 5% chance. Like, that's not very likely. Everything would have to break wrong for the other teams in the division for that to happen. But I see a big jump happening. I see this team as probably in the same range as the Seahawks. I think 6 to 10. 10 being optimistic side. I think 6 to 7 being realistic. We even joked about in the draft because you thought I was crazy, but I think if everything breaks right with this team, and I think Gannon's a good coach, and I think he kind of coached almost over his ability last year, or his talent, because they were in a lot of close games that they lost. Like, they beat the Cowboys too, which was kind of crazy. Beat the Eagles, they beat the Cowboys, they beat the Steelers. Those were all 3 of those teams made the playoffs. I can't remember who their other win was. They should have beat
Atlanta,
yeah. But, like, they should have beat the Rams in Los Angeles.
They gave the 49ers a close, or like they lost by 16, but I remember that game being fairly close late.
The theme of the Cardinals season was, like, they're going to play really well in the first 3 quarters or the first half. But the talent difference between these teams, like, it just made a huge, they fell off. The Commanders game was another great example, week 1, where they should have won the game, but Josh Dobbs is your quarterback, and, like, you just can't get over the hump. Like, and if Kyler plays a full season, this team's not a 4-win team. Yeah. Last year, if Kyler played the full season, they're probably a 6 to 7 win. Like, Kyler's going to add 3 wins to that total. And I think they made talent upgrades. So I think the range is anywhere between 6 to 10. And a good season for this team, like, they should be striving to get that 6 or 7 seed in the NFC. Is that going to happen? I think that's a flip of a coin. I think things have to break right for them. But I'm pretty bullish overall. I really like what they've done. I'm higher on Kyler Murray too. What are your thoughts on the Cardinals?
They one of the biggest areas, besides obviously having Kyler come back, that'll help, and it should help the entire team. But even when Kyler did come back last year, the defense still wasn't good.
Yeah.
Now I know that's Gannon's specialty, so that's where his real coaching is going to come from. Now is like how well can he coach that defense back up? They did get Bilal Nichols.
Go ahead. Sorry.
They got Bilal Nichols from the Raiders in free agency. Bilal Nichols was a Ryan Pace draft pick, actually.
Yeah.
And he's turned in a pretty decent career. If you get your third contract, you're having a pretty decent career. I've never been high on their linebackers, and even looking at their linebackers right now, there's names that you recognize, but nobody's standing out. They did add, I think they added Sean Murphy Bunting over the offseason, which is a big get, I think, for them. They made their top 2 draft picks, well, besides Marvin Harrison Jr. So besides him, we're towards their defense. They got Darius Robinson in the first round, which I kind of remember that being a bit of a reach. But he was probably the most, he talking about ranges, he had the biggest range of pass rushers, if I remember from the draft.
Mm-hmm. He was like, because he was such a, like, he feels like kind of I compared him to like the kind of prototypical like bitch kitty from Mike Pettine's defenses, or Rex Ryan's defenses. Like if people remember like Muhammad Wilkerson, that kind of guy, like really long, can kind of play anywhere. Like he can play inside and outside, a little bit of a tweener in that sense. Yeah. But like those guys are so valuable to have because they're versatile. He's not going to put up like big sack numbers, but guys like that make your defense better.
Yes, they do.
They're going to they're going to let other guys make a lot of tackles, make tackles for loss, pressure the QB because of the athleticism you're bringing into your defense. The one thing that's kind of interesting, like Monty Ossenfort, the general manager, one thing he's had to do is he's had to overhaul this roster. Like there's been such a lack of talent, and as you mentioned specifically defensively, that Steve Keim just left like a huge void. There's not a lot. Even now, like it's not a great looking unit, and that's the one reservation you have to have with this team. And if every team in the NFC West stays healthy, you're playing 2 games against the healthy Rams, 2 games against the healthy Seahawks, and 2 games against the 49ers. They're going to get run over on defense against those types of teams. That's the one drawback. Like I like Kyler. I don't like him enough to think that he could overcome like a bottom 5 defensive unit. And that's what this team could be. And you mentioned Jonathan Gannon, defensive background. I get it, but he had all his success in Philly. That Philly team had a lot more talent than this team does right here. So Gannon's going to have to prove his worth. Where I liked Gannon's approach last year is he kept games close with a bad team.
Yeah.
I always like that when I see that from a head coach, especially like in his first season.
The first year,
where he's coaching over his skis a little bit. I like that. I think he's got to grow now, where he's got to get from having a bad unit on that side of the ball. Like he's got to coach them up to where they can be an average team or an average unit on that side of the ball. And then let Kyler and Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, and let those guys go score points. Because they have so much talent offensively.
Yeah.
So I think all in all, I really like where the Cardinals are. I think this is a transition year. We've talked about this before, like teams that are in horrible places. So this team won 4 games last year. They were horrible. I think the goal they should have to be, their goal should be to win 8 games.
Yeah.
And then next year is the jump where they go.
Next year you're talking wild card, or if the 49ers, or contending for a division. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hell, if things break the right way, let's say Kyler makes that jump we've been waiting 5 years for, and Marvin Harrison's everything we think of, and they finally figured out their offensive line, which I feel like they have never done that since I've been watching the Cardinals. If they figure everything out, like in 2 years, this team could, like, who knows? Like, we've seen teams rally and make a Super Bowl faster than that.
The Cardinals did 15 years or 16 years ago.
The Eagles went from like firing Doug Peterson and like getting rid of Carson Wentz 2 years later, Super Bowl. So like crazier things have happened. Like rosters can get overhauled. And like we'll talk about your Bears next week. If things break the right way for them, maybe in 2 years they're winning the NFC. Like you can say that for every team.
Yeah,
arguably, but there's at least momentum for this team to do that. But this team's not winning the NFC this year. We can say that with confidence. What this team needs to be looking for is 8 wins. Try to stay in contention for the wild card at the end of the season.
Right.
That's really the gauge we're looking for. And maybe things break right. You get a couple bounces. You win some close games. You're at 9-10 wins. You're a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it could work. But I overall, I like this team a lot. But I don't like them enough to like say with confidence, like this is a playoff team. When you laughed at me on the draft stream, you laughed at me saying all I said was they could make the playoffs. Could. I think that's totally plausible. I think if everything breaks right for them, I think that could happen. But I'm kind of in agreement with you. I think 6-7 wins is probably
it's about where I think they'll end up.
Yeah. So let's go through the NFC West real fast. So I think we both agree 49ers number 1.
Yep.
Or do you think the Rams?
It like I said, it all depends on that early season schedule. If they get out to a slow start again this year, especially against those teams that they're going to be competing for playoff spots against, I don't think they'll win the West. But if they do get out to a hot start against those teams, then the division is theirs for the taking.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing the 49ers losing or winning less than 10 games. So by that statement alone, they should be the favorite because you can't really say that about any team outside of like them, the Chiefs, the Ravens maybe Buffalo,
maybe Houston.
Maybe I wouldn't even say that about Houston, like because
they could get 9 wins. Yeah, possibly.
I need track records. Like when I get to double-digit win totals, like
I gotta every year.
Yeah, I gotta see like 2 years of it. So, but yeah, I would say San Francisco's 1. I would say anywhere between 10 to 13 wins.
I have them at 11.
So, right, we agree on that.
Yeah, which is still a downturn a little bit for them, but
Rams, I think, are the widest variety, and I only say that because if Stafford has like elbow bursitis, by week 5, they win 4 games.
The Stafford injury.
If Stafford gets hurt, this team wins 4 to 6 games. If Stafford stays healthy, I think they're between 9 to 11.
Mm-hmm. I have him at 10.
Okay. So it really just depends on which Rams you're talking about, really.
Excuse me. Sorry, guys.
Who's third place for you?
I have the Cardinals at 7 and 10.
Okay. This is tough for me. Because I don't think either team is very special, but I think they both have qualities. I think it's kind of a flip of the coin, but just for good radio, I'm going to disagree with you.
Oh.
So I'm going to go Seattle. I'm going to go 7 to 9 wins. Don't see anything past. I really like if they hit 9 wins, it's going to be just like years past where they, Gino has a good year, but that's what they are. They're a 9-win team, right? I think 7 wins is probably more likely than 9. This team is just middle of the road. I'm going Seattle there. I think the Cardinals, the reason I put them last is I think they still have the lowest range of outcome of any of these teams in this division because of the defense specifically. Kyler can put up a great season, but we've seen it before where if this team's giving up close to 30 points a game, you can't win a lot of games that way. I think that, and if Kyler, doesn't progress like we want him to, that's the other thing. I think their low end is probably 5, maybe 6, like I said, but I'm almost thinking 5 wins if they just don't make any improvements. I think 9 wins is their cap, and maybe like a 7 seed is kind of their peak. So I'll go Arizona last, but I don't think Arizona and Seattle are all that different. I just think Seattle's kind of a safer bet to be mediocre, but I like Arizona to have like a higher end outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But with that, that's the NFC West. So we got it done in less than an hour. Next week we will have the AFC North. So we'll have part 7 of our division preview series, and then we'll finish up with the NFC North, which is by far
the football game next week.
Yeah.
The Bears and the Texans play in tomorrow will be 168 hours.
Are you counting down for the Hall of Fame game?
Wow. I have a countdown clock here somewhere. It's a big day.
The one time we were supposed to be in the Hall of Fame game, and like I was actually kind of excited. I was like, football season's on its way. Like Packers going to be in the Hall of Fame game. I can watch it. And then they used the wrong paint on the midfield. And then they're like, yeah, we're not playing. And I'm like,
I remember I was up in Michigan. My family and our family friends, we go up to this place called Sister Lakes, for anybody that may know what that is. And we on Sunday nights, the tradition is to go out for drinks. And we used to go to this place called Captain Jack's. And so this was like when they didn't have any Wi-Fi in any of the cabins. So we had no idea like what was going on in the outside world. And we went up there and we're like, oh, we'll catch the Packers. And I think they were playing the Raiders.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, was this was this 2019 you said?
No, this is 2016, I think it was, when the Packers, 2017, one of those 2 years.
Was this when we were in Canada?
No, this was the Hall of Fame game.
Hall of Fame. No, it was the Colts.
The Colts, sorry.
Yeah, so the Hall of Fame game, we were playing the Colts, yeah.
So, and we went up to Captain Jack's, and we were like, I don't even remember what they had on the TV, but they didn't have the Packers game on, and we were like, well, where's the football? And like nobody could answer. Like, I think after a while, because that was one place you could get Wi-Fi. Somebody was like, oh, the game got canceled. We were like, what? I guess I just got a drink now. Or but here's a fun fact about the Bears in the Hall of Fame game. The last 4 times the Bears have played in the Hall of Fame game, they made the playoffs that year. Yeah.